That's really cool though. And one more question here before I kick it over to James. Now that you're working in the Web3 space and you have the ability to really influence the art direction of a multi-game ecosystem, where we're working with game studios themselves who have an idea around a game and may have some art direction already in place, but they're bringing it into this ecosystem where there may be some portability for certain assets that you acquire in that game, either outside the game in sort of the real world or in other actual games. How do you see kind of like what's your approach to the art direction of like a multi-game ecosystem that Stadia X is bringing to life, where you might have one game like we have with Space Race X where you're in space and you're flying and stuff, but then you've got another game like Hyperloop where you're really exploring a maze and you're a character in a world that you've got to kind of navigate as fast as you can, but you're not in space and you're not in ships and stuff. How do you see the art direction from a multi-game perspective, like playing out in this Web3 age that we're moving into?
Well, one, we need more games, so that we're kind of limited. You don't have people in Space Race X, but you do have ships and things. Um, you have to look at, all right, from an art direction standpoint, you got to look at style. What kind of a style is
Yeah,
this game? Like if it's a pixel game, if we're going to be, providing avatars, we'll have to think in terms of, what style of avatar is going to work for what style of game. So,
yep,
from the standpoint of an art direction, directive, it's going to be okay. With this avatar, what games will it work in? So it'll work in Hyperloop, but it may not work in Space Race X, obviously, or it may not work in
yeah,
other games, but it'll probably work on Maze of the Gatherers. So that's something where we got to start looking at how do we design characters that can go, or objects or items that can be used in multiple games. So there has to be some sort of overall road, basically a roadmap that shows us, okay, we can design these characters for games A, B, D, F, and G or something, but they
hmm
won't work in these other games. So it's really going to be, how can we optimize different styles of characters, different styles of avatars, for selling as NFTs, for selling as avatars for various games. It's going to be really dependent on the game itself. And if there's a way we can influence something that we know, okay, this is going to be a real, a first person game or a third person game, what's the style? Because a lot of times a developer's going to bring their own style into, they have their own art direction already.
right,
So how do we tie together what their art direction is with what we're going to be providing them? Or can they provide us with their characters that we can then include in our collections? So
yeah,
people can then
yeah,
utilize them, because when you start looking at multiple games, um, and you try to justify how the art is being designed for all of them, I mean, it can get very complex very quickly. And until
yeah.
we start getting a lot of different games out there, and I know some companies are doing this already, not quite the way I think that we're going to be doing it, but um, it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of figure out how that's all going to work, as far as how do we manage an ecosystem that works across games,
Yeah,
numerous games. Items might work differently.
for
Maybe
sure.
they're used to be sold, so you can buy more items in a different game. There's just a lot of ways that we could utilize, the economy within the whole company that can be made, to be variable, so that way you can sell things to buy things in another game. That's how I see it right now.
No, yeah, that's cool, and I also think that brings some cool options to developers too, because as the game ecosystem within Stadia X grows, you know, depending on the different styles of the games and the style of the incoming game, we can offer developers a lot of different sort of enhancements and augmentations to the gaming experience for their own users, where they can choose to allow avatars from other games to be used within their game, or even objects that command a certain like power level or status level from another game to be used within their games. And it creates a cool kind of cross community synergy where you first have to go and discover this shield in game A, and then you can bring that over to game B, and it becomes like one of the stronger shields in the game. But you really can't get it in that game B without first playing game A. And so
Right.
I think there's some really cool ecosystem stuff we can do there.
Right. And I think an important thing, obviously, is going to be the SDK that we provide developers, so that way that we can make sure we can tie these things together.
Yeah,
Um,
and make it easy for them too, right? Because we don't.
yeah.
One of
Mm,
the big things with StadiaX is that we don't want these game developers to become blockchain developers. We want them to be able to just have a wider tool set with which to develop the gaming experience for their users. And
yep.
so making sure that the SDKs and APIs are really easy to use and just kind of give them an a la carte menu of different augmentations and enhancements with which they can provide their gamers experience improvements is really what we want to target. And so I think it's going to be interesting to get feedback from them as we get the first few games here up and live, and then seeing how that evolves over time, especially as we get to a larger and larger gaming ecosystem.